Welcome to Fuller Speed Ahead. I'm Craig Fuller, right here from Freight Alley in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've got Bob Voltmann, the President and CEO of the TIA from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Craig. Great to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Let's talk a little bit about what the TIA does and who you represent.
So we're the largest organization. We represent the 3PL industry. We have 1,800 members. We represent about 70% of the marketplace by value. Our members are primarily truck brokers, but that's how we move freight in this country, is by truck. But we also have, our members are also truck owning companies, they're warehousemen, they do air freight, they do sea freight, and they do more intermodal than any other group of 3PLs in the marketplace. The industry's growing. Armstrong & Associates pegs it at about a 9% CAGR for the last 20 years.
That's insane.
About a $200 billion industry.
Wait, I saw something interesting. I think Wall Street Journal had covered it, but talked about the highest return on assets of any business and in any industry is actually in third-party logistics. I thought that was sort of astounding when you look at how efficient and fast-growing the sector is.
It's amazing, and what they've done over the 40 years that the marketplace has existed is just phenomenal.
So Bob, you think about all of the new digitization taking place. I mean, trucking's sexy all of a sudden, where it wasn't, 10 years ago. Even this is a recent phenomenon, really just a couple of years. You think about the new entrants, the digital brokers, the Uber Freights, the Convoys, coming in and raising venture capital of which we have never seen it before. How do you think about the impact to the broader industry, and what do you think that means for the incumbents that are facing these new entrants which operate on completely different metrics?
So the industry's always been tech savvy. The industry's always been the tech adopters and the tech adapters. So when the shippers shed their old transportation departments, they became 3PLs in the first instance. And then those companies, to stay profitable and to continue to grow, kept adopting new technology. Your company is leading the way with that, bringing new technology, data to the marketplace. So these digital brokers, these digital freight companies, I think they just have better PR. They're not doing, they may be pushing in some new directions, but their gains will be short-lived because then other companies will pick up what they've learned,
right,
and turn it around to the broader marketplace and democratize that technology.
Yeah, there's something like 16,000 3PLs in the United States, is that right? And so it's a massively fragmented industry. And I think you pointed out something really interesting is, as those companies gain an edge, you have these very large and mature and sophisticated operators like, the big guys like C.H. Robinson and Echo that are publicly traded that are watching what they're doing and oftentimes emulating as fast, in some cases faster than what the new entrants are doing.
Correct.
And so how do you think about sort of the direction of the market? Do you think over the next decade we'll see consolidation in the 3PL industry, or do we see expansion?
There'll be consolidation. It's not going to be wholesale consolidation with people being wiped out and disappeared, but there will be consolidation. There's an estimated $1.5 trillion of dry private equity money looking at the sector. So it's natural as the industry grows, people will want to sell out, cash out. But it's like squeezing toothpaste out of the tube. You really can't put it back in.
Right.
And so when backhaulers sold, we, back in 1998, we saw 6 or 8 sons of backhaulers that are to, one of those became Coyote,
right,
which sold. And you've got Access America right here in Chattanooga. How many have spun off from that?
Oh, at least 20.
So we're going to see this continuous growth in the industry. And so what I really think will happen over time is you'll see some striation of the shippers they serve. Maybe the biggest companies are going to serve the biggest shippers, and the mid-sized companies serve the mid-shippers. It's going to be a fun thing to watch. The past 20 years have been an amazing ride. I think the next 10 years, 120 months, is going to be as vibrant a change as we've seen in the past 20.
Yeah, and oftentimes it's the 3PLs that are actually innovators and the ones adopting technology. If you sort of compare the freight market to, say, the financial markets, the day traders of the market are really built in the brokerages. And oftentimes, places like Chicago, they're hiring people who used to be on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade, or now, in many ways, filling out their brokerage operations. But, as you think about the tech innovation, a lot of it's taking place in the 3PLs. They seem to be leading the charge in terms of innovation, far faster than the larger asset carriers or even some of the mid-sized asset carriers. I oftentimes think that the asset carriers are they operate like dinosaurs, where they're sort of stuck inside these old trends, and where you see the innovations taking place with the 3PL market. How do you think about as you guys build education and forums for technology, how do you help your members respond to tech changes?
It's one of those, it's a mega trend that we've identified, our board has identified that we need to address. The trucking industry seems incapable of finding the right balance between the actual supply of trucks and the actual supply of freight. It's not as perfect and porous a market as ideally it should be, so that rates were always at a certain level. So if we're going to be in a period of declining rates, how do companies make more money? And they have to become more efficient. So we're focused on helping our member companies be more efficient, understand their costs through benchmarking and data, and then automate what they can automate. No longer are companies going to be able to afford to make 12 or 20 phone calls to get a load on a truck. That needs to be automated.
Right. And they have to eliminate all that back office cost.
Correct.
That is associated with the transactions.
Correct. What makes the 3PL model different is they are so attuned to their cost. Mm-hmm. And they can see in every single transaction, they bake it right into their systems. This is what I'm making on the load. This is what my cost is on the load. And if I go below a certain percentage point, I had to get my supervisor to come over and bless it.
It's a different mindset than running assets.
Totally different.
It's interesting because being in Chattanooga, we have a lot of asset-based companies that are here, large ones, and there's a lot of freight brokers that have spun out of Access America. And it's interesting because the 3PLs, the brokers, are very spot transactional. How do they maximize the margin? They know the cost. Whereas the asset guys are thinking sort of yield management, keeping the driver in the seat, and employed as long as they possibly can, and stretching that turnover cycle. But the culture, the cultural elements, one of the things I learned from Ted Aileen, the Access America team is, and I think in Chicago as well, is the successful brokers are all culture. They really invest in really strong sales cultures, which you don't typically see in traditional asset-based trucking.
Well, when you go, and I know you have, when you go visit the asset side of a company and then the non-asset side of the company, it's night and day. Mm-hmm. 80% of the asset-based people are operational. They're trying to squeeze one more penny out of every dollar they spend. Mm-hmm. 80% of the non-asset-based side is sales.
Yeah.
And
it's a tough, running
they're trying to get more dollars in the door.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot of PE activity, and you alluded to it earlier, going towards the asset-based, the 3PL side. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense because there are a lot of advantages and you can get yield. Rarely do I see a PE firm have success buying an asset-based operator, because that's an operational-centric type business, whereas the 3PL model is sales culture, metrics driven. It's a bit more of a sales and optimization of the process and customer support than it is on the asset side. I wonder, I've often said this, the conversation about driverless trucks comes up a lot. I know for me, and I suspect for you as well. I wonder, what I believe is that the 3PLs have the advantages in an autonomous world, if we ever get there, versus the asset-based guys, because the assets are far focused on yield optimization, keeping the drivers employed, and recruiting and retention, whereas the 3PLs are data science, business intelligence, marketing, the things that you need when technology is driving the future versus what we see with the asset side.
So I think what we're going to see is more autonomy in trucks, more driver assist, lane keeping, adaptive cruise control, the same thing that we now have in our mm-hmm. cars. I think we are 30 years from fully autonomous, drive anywhere, go anytime trucks without drivers. And I also think that is an earth-altering event. Your mention of dinosaurs.
It completely changes
I think
everything.
it changes everything. If trucks become robots, if you will, I think it's an earth-altering event for both the asset side and the 3PL side.
Right.
But to get to 80% of truck accidents are caused by four-wheel vehicles around them. You first have to automate all the four-wheel vehicles, because you can't mix drivers and no drivers.
Right.
Because you can't change physics. You can automate, but you can't change physics. And then you have this wild card of motorcycles. You would have to ban motorcycles from highways in which you allow autonomous cars and autonomous trucks to operate.
Right.
And frankly, we have to invest in infrastructure in this country, and we're not very good at that.
No, we're
so
horrible at that.
I think we are 30, maybe 40 years.
And the other thing is you have point to point, so you have to deal with state and municipalities to deal if you're actually going to have a point to point autonomous. So I agree with you. I believe that it's at least a 10 years out.
areas, closed.
Ports, you see some ports that are quasi-automated. They're I think at times the unions will suggest they're more automated than they really are.
But we also have this thing called railroads.
Right. Exactly.
That operate.
They are, that box is autonomous. One of the things that's getting a lot of attention is the gray trailer pools, the idea that some of the freight brokers, JB Hunt's come out with their Box 360, which is basically a mode agnostic platform for capacity. I wonder, how do you think that the 3PL industry should respond to those situations?
I think we have to find a way to democratize that so that it's available to more players. I think the biggest change in the industry is the ELD. And what the ELD does is it finally provides empirical data to the trucking company about their most valuable asset. In fact, the most valuable asset in the entire logistics chain is the human being sitting behind the wheel of the truck. So I think the ELD, and as the trucking companies learn how to use it, it's going to fundamentally change live loading and unloading. And so for 3PLs to continue to survive and thrive, we have to have great trailer pools.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think oftentimes the ELD mandates, it's obviously a very polarizing conversation, but I think the advantage is we have data. For the first time, we can hold the bad actors accountable, whether it could be the asset operators that are not treating the drivers well, it could be the freight brokers and 3PLs that at times may not, but also the shippers now have accountability. And we have a version of truth, and I think that's an underappreciated and undersaid story in terms of what we see. I'm curious, trade policy is getting a ton of attention this year for obvious reasons. There is a law that's currently looking to be, has it been passed, the USMCA?
So Congress has, USMCA,
Okay.
United States, Mexico, Canada Agreement.
NAFTA was far easier.
NAFTA was far easier. We should have just called it
branding. You think Trump would have figured that out? Branding,
yeah, but it wasn't his brand.
There
so we couldn't have Trump 2 because that would have been George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton.
There you go. Yeah.
Congress has to ratify the USMCA. The Mexican Senate has already ratified it. The Canadian Parliament will ratify it. Canada and Mexico are by far our largest trading partners. We have nearly equal trade between them. We can't survive without Canadian and Mexican markets.
Right.
And as China continues to mature and their middle class continues to develop and their population continues to decline, it's hard to think of a billion-person country as having a population shortage, but they do.
Right.
That's going to bring the opportunity for nearshoring of manufacturing back to North America. And when you couple that with almost free energy costs in the United States because of fracking, and chemicals and plastics being made here in the United States because of fracking. You have this amazing opportunity for a manufacturing renaissance in North America, and but it all hinges on
trade,
on Congress passing the USMCA.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll see something with that.
They have to get it done this fall.
Yeah, just because of the cycle, the election cycle. If they don't do it now, it will. Right. A lot of stuff in regulation. I know you guys are dealing with a lot of regulation that's both will empower and develop the industry, but also could potentially cripple it if it's not addressed. Certainly a lot of concern about the independent contractor and independent agent model. There was actually California has been pretty aggressive anti-independent contractors, which is ironic considering Lyft and Uber are both based in California. I'm curious, how do you think about the impact of the 3PL brokerage industry as it relates to independent contracting, the independent agents, and what that potentially means if this becomes a trend around the country?
So we've had a trend over the past 10 years, say, of pushing costs to their lowest level. Some might even say that's how the 3PL industry started out 40 years ago, with shippers pushing what was a cost to them out. But what we see is an attack by states on independent contractors. And I think that over the next 10 years, over the next 120 months, when we look out, we're going to see this continue chopping away at independent contractors. And it's going to have a huge impact. You throw into that what's going on with franchises and lawyers trying to make corporate McDonald's responsible for what their franchisees do. That's going to play out on the 3PL side. So we're very active in those spaces to try to protect that. You have people who want to be independent businesses. They want to be independent salespeople. They don't want someone to come in and say, you can't be your own boss anymore. You have to be an employee. This is going to be a tug of war that we're going to fight in the United States over the next, I think it's going to play out over the next 120 months. And it's always a when the Congress and the White House switch parties, whenever that happens, it will happen in the next 10 years, that fight is going to accelerate.
Yeah, it is concerning because we've seen a lot of growth in the gig economy. This whole business model is potentially at risk, and certainly companies in trucking that actually has a lot of independent contractors and independent owner-operators. And I know that subject gets batted around on the classifications. There's been lawsuits and Supreme Court rulings on how those should be classified. At the end of the day, it does change the construct of the model. Trucking is a difficult business, particularly asset-based trucking. And for them to have to face some of these government and tort influence pressures is an unfortunate reality. On that subject, I am curious as you think about, there seems to be an emerging trend that started a couple of years ago, but has just accelerated around brokers and third parties being held accountable in lawsuits at the levels of some of the larger asset payouts. I'm curious, as you think about what that means and what TIA is doing, and how do you educate people in terms of the brokers, in terms of ensuring that they're using compliant carriers, ensuring that they're doing the right things to keep themselves safe?
For 10 years now, we have published on an annual basis a carrier selection framework. It's basically a workbook that we update on an annual basis based on recent court cases for our members to establish their own carrier selection criteria for their company based on known risk factors. But everybody has their own risk level. I like lots of insurance. You might not like any. So we all approach risk from a different standpoint. So we didn't want to come up with anything prescriptive for the industry. So we put this workbook out. Unfortunately, it's now used in most of these lawsuits by the trial bar.
To prove or disprove that the broker did not follow through.
Correct.
So if they don't follow through what you guys have suggested, best practices maybe is the right term for it, then they potentially, that could be their business.
Right.
It could put them out of business and personally liable.
Right. So trucking accidents have become the new tobacco, the new asbestos.
Oh, it's. I mean, there was a lawsuit. I believe it was a few weeks ago in Georgia. There was a trial lawyer, a jury trial. $300 million, I think, was the number. And there was another one that was. I mean, these payouts are massive.
Well, the United States is. People look at lawsuits as winning the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
So
and trial law, you just turn on TV and there are
drive through any town. There's a billboard.
Yep.
Truck accident, call me.
Yeah.
So we're working on this issue. We've been trying to get legislation passed through Congress that would create a safe harbor, for hiring trucks.
Mm-hmm.
If FMCSA says they're safe and able to operate, because there have been some cases where the carrier was rated satisfactory by FMCSA, and even post-accident on an audit, they were rated satisfactory.
Right.
Sometimes accidents happen.
They do.
So I know ATA is now really getting concerned about torts. It affects the larger companies more than the smaller companies. A lot of times in a truck accident, it's the owner-operator, and unfortunately they probably died in the accident. Their insurance company pays their $1 million liability and walks away.
And then there's these lawsuits in certain states and districts can get 20, 30, 50, hundreds of millions of dollars. And the problem is it doesn't end.
No.
Because once you see a $300 million payout, all the other lawyers who are competitive by nature, if you go to trial, you're competitive. You want to win. They want to top that and be the biggest. Yeah. So it's an unfortunate reality. And I don't know of except for maybe the largest asset carriers and even the largest 3PLs, there's very few people that can write that big of a check.
Right.
And it exceeds your insurance policy. So certainly following it. And now to get access to this playbook or this, what did you call the framework? The framework. They should be a member and sign up for TIA. Is that the best way to get it?
That's always the best way to get it.
Do they have to be a member to get access to it?
We'll give it to them if they're not.
Got it. So what other advantages of joining TIA do you guys really focus on?
We really focus on helping them run their business and remain as profitable as they can be. So whether that's through advocacy or through training of employees or through helping them understand why they need data, why they need FreightWaves, all of those things. So we take a really holistic approach about helping that 3PL be as successful as they want to be. Do they want to just run a nice family-owned business doing about $5 million in gross revenue or less? Or do they want to be the next Coyote or XPO or CH Robinson?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, particularly the younger folks, are looking to be that next CH Robinson or
and they can
Coyote.
Be.
Yeah.
They can be, and we can help them.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Bob, I really appreciate it. I have one important question for you. We went to the same university, Baylor Bears.
Sick and Bears.
What are we going to finish this year? Undefeated? National championship?
From your lips to God's ears. We're going to at least be at the top of the conference.
All right, I like that. I will take it. I'm going to say undefeated, and we beat Alabama. My wife is an Alabama grad. So
my wife's a UT grad. So
you Tennessee or
no?
Texas.
Texas.
Okay. All right. Folks here, Tennessee is
know.
not doing so well this year. They can't blame it on their SEC competitive schedule this year, though, because they've lost to 2 non-conference teams. Well, Bob, I really appreciate coming here
Craig,
today in
thank you.
Chattanooga. Thanks for joining us. We hope you're back here in Chattanooga soon, and we'll see you at your conferences. You've got one coming up in November. You also have one in May.
Big one in April 1 to 4. Yours is in May.
Ours is in May.
Yours is in May.
Yours is in, what's the date?
April 1 to 4 in Austin.
Oh, Austin's a great town.
So hook 'em horns.
There you go, Sick 'em Bears. Well, Bob, appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, Craig.